My name is Yolanda Moyo. I'm the Senior Director for Policy Advocacy at IAVI, and I'm happy to introduce the session today. I'll just switch off my video just to save on bandwidth whilst we proceed. Okay, so firstly, I'll introduce IAVI. For some of you who haven't heard of IAVI, IAVI is a non-profit scientific research organization that develops vaccines and antibodies for HIV, TB, emerging infectious diseases, including COVID-19 and other neglected diseases such as snake bites. Underpinning our work is the mission to translate scientific discoveries into affordable, globally accessible health solutions. And today's session on domestic resource mobilization for HIV and for HIV R&D in Africa is made possible by the funding we get from AVAC. So we are truly grateful for the support from AVAC. So today we want to discuss and share some of the reports that we were able to put together in partnership with our partners and colleagues across Africa. So maybe as a bit of a background to this session today, in 2016, the Africa Union member states committed to investing at least 1% of their GDP into R&D in recognition of two very important aspects. One being that really to make investment sustainable in Africa. I mean, we are all aware that we get funding from overseas donors, we get funding from the Global Fund and other diversified funders. However, we really need to mobilize resources from within Africa to make this truly sustainable. And not only does it improve the health of our population, but it also builds on economic development, creation of employment, etc. And it also allows for Africa-led research and development priority setting. So we all know that whoever puts the dollars on the table gets to set the research agenda. So it's really important that our African states also start contributing significantly towards health R&D. So with this backdrop, we convened in 2020 as advocates and, building off a report that was done by Waki Health, AIDS Accountability International on investments in Africa for HIV R&D. Those recommendations that came out of that report really highlighted some significant issues that we needed as a society. Please, can you mute yourselves if you're not speaking? I'm getting some background noise. Please, colleagues, could you mute yourself if you're not speaking? Thank you. So the backdrop of the report that was done by Waki Health, AIDS Accountability International, commissioned by IAVI in 2016, highlighted the importance of building capacity for civil society organizations to keep our governments accountable to the commitments that they've made. So we've taken this a step further in 2020, where we partnered with SIGA to start building off and creating a baseline for accountability in terms of civil society being aware of what resources are being allocated domestically in 5 countries in Africa. And from there, we then started training civil society on budget advocacy and how they can start creating a movement for accountability towards funding for health R&D. So today we'll hear from Nhlanhla from SIGA, who will share the highlights of that report. And then we'll also hear from Joyce from Waki Health, who will share some of the analysis that they've put together around policies that enable domestic resource mobilization in Africa. So we've seen with COVID-19 what can be achieved when resources are made available, when policies are enabling for R&D to happen, removing barriers to regulatory bureaucracy in terms of policies, and also strong partnerships between private private sector and public sector, as well as academia, international organizations, and civil society. So we've seen what we can do together as a collective with strong partnerships. So without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague, Ethel, who will introduce our first speaker. Ethel, over to you.
So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to introduce Nangan Glovu, who's going to give us a presentation on a preliminary assessment of HIV research and development investments in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Zambia, and South Africa. This is more of a case study. I'm conscious of the time, so Nala has quite limited time. He has 10 minutes, but it's so much that needs to be said. So I'll let you take over, Lanla. I'll stop sharing my screen, and Lanla, you can share yours.
Good day, everybody. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I am not going to waste any time in terms of giving some background and introductions because I think Yolanda has done this quite nicely. I'm just going to jump into the presentation. Please note that this is quite a detailed material, so I will be scrolling through quickly, but you will be receiving the full reports, I'm sure. So if you've got any questions, I'm sure the detail will be in the full presentation as well as in the report. Okay, so basically what we did to basically try to understand how much our countries investing in health and HIV R&D. We engaged with our partners in 5 countries, but also we sourced a lot of information from government documents looking at budget and expenditure documents, which we found quite detailed in some areas, but in some places the information was not really publicly available. So in terms of what we wanted to do, we wanted to determine how much countries are contributing to health and HIV R&D, but also to try and identify and understand budget processes in each country, especially for advocacy, because once we understand how much countries are investing, we will be able to know if they are under-investing or over-investing, and if we feel that there are concerns regarding investments in HIV R&D, then we need to develop advocacy. But for us to develop advocacy campaigns, we need to understand the budget process itself, but also to try and identify gaps in the process where we feel civil society and other partners can jump in and influence or contribute. Going through the findings. So in terms of trying to understand the budget processes in these countries, we basically consulted the International Budget Partnership, looking at the Open Budget Survey, the OBS, which basically tells us how each country performs on budget transparency, public participation, and budget oversight. So the OBS basically tries to show where on transparency, openness, and oversight each country is. And each country aims to achieve at least, a total of 100 points to be considered an open country or an open budget process. So if you look at this picture quickly, you can see that most of the countries are performing poorly on public participation, which basically means if we are going to do budget advocacy, I'm sorry. Sorry, could I request colleagues to mute yourself? Okay, so basically almost all these countries that we looked at are performing very poorly on public participation, having scored the maximum of 24 out of 100. But you can see if you look at budget oversight, they are doing okay, if I may put it that way. And then if you look at transparency, they seem to be doing okay, except for Rwanda and Zambia. And we can see South Africa there with the top score of 87%. So basically, we could actually use this index to see where our country is regarding budget openness, and then basically craft some questions that we can ask for us to make meaningful input into the budget process, but also to make sure that civil society's voice is heard in determining the needs that we are concerned about. Looking specifically at health R&D expenditures per country. So I'm going to start with Kenya. So here in Kenya, you can actually see that the health share in the total government allocations has been increasing slightly. You can see that in 2017, health received 6.5%, and this increased to 7.7% in 2019. But this is still below the 15% target that was set in line with the Abuja Declaration, which basically stipulated that countries should allocate 15% of their national budget to health. So you can see here in Kenya, it's still below that target, which basically means we need to try and investigate what are the health priorities, and within our health needs, which ones are not really funded. And then the question is health R&D sufficiently covered if we are spending so little on health overall? But then, very interestingly, within that health spending in Kenya, we can see that health R&D is receiving 4.2%. This was the record for 2019, 2020, which is quite interesting, having seen that African governments were also committing to spend at least 2% of their health budget on health R&D. So if we look at the Kenya record, this looks pretty good, having spent 4.2% on health R&D within that very scarce health envelope. But then the question that we'll have here is, why is it fluctuating? Because you can see 2017, it was 5.5%, but now it is 4.2%. And then it will be good to keep tracking to see moving forward, how is the health R&D spending happening. Looking at South Africa, we can see that South Africa has been spending quite massively on health. If we look at how much is South Africa spending on health as a share in total government allocations, South Africa is spending about 12% of the total budget on health, which is quite good, but it's still concerning because it is still below the Abuja Declaration target of 15%. So we need to actually keep watching if these allocations are growing from year to year, to make sure that health does not lose resources to other ministries, because we know that the health needs are growing from year to year. So if we look at health R&D in South Africa, we saw that South Africa spent 19.2% of their gross expenditure on R&D on health, which was quite interesting, because in terms of the ASAF recommendations, South Africa wanted to spend at least 20% of the country's total R&D on health. So 19.2 is not too far off the mark, which is great. But also we have seen that the national health budget is allocating quite a lot of money through the South African Medical Research Council, which basically is very close to the 2% target that we are talking about, saying that 2% of the national health, of the national budget should go to health R&D. So this is quite interesting to see that it's happening in South Africa. But then if we look at the government expenditure overall in South Africa, you can see that there are massive increases in the total government expenditure. But also if you look at the green bars, this is consolidated health allocations, which is growing, I would say, not as fast as the national government expenditure. Looking at Rwanda, please bear with me because I have to rush because of time. If we look at the national budget picture of Rwanda, So we now understand that Rwanda spends on its national priorities through its national strategy for transformation, which is basically the umbrella policy that the government is working on. So, and we also know that health is basically allocated under the social transformation program. And if we look at the health R&D, it was important for us to look at that social transformation program and see what is in it for health and then what is in it for health R&D as well. So if we look at the health share in the total government expenditure, it has been declining from year to year. In 2014, Rwanda spent 10.8% of their total budget on health, which has declined to about 7.7% of total expenditure of government going to health. So this is concerning, basically saying, why is it that investments in health are declining overall? And then if these investments are declining, what is then happening to the health research budget? So interestingly, even though the total health budget is declining, the health research budget is actually growing, is estimated to grow by 20% in the current financial year. And it is again expected to grow in 2022 by another 33%, which is great. But then we also need to keep watch on other health programs to make sure that the money is not going to one priority and leaving the other ones underfunded. So basically, this picture shows the fluctuations in the budget, especially in the health research spending. But the good thing is that from 2021, we can see that it is growing. It is growing by 3% in 2022. Uganda. So here we've seen in Uganda that total spending shows a positive trend from year to year, basically looking at the total government budget, which is growing, which is quite interesting. Because even though there are donations that are coming in, but government keeps increasing its local resources, which is quite interesting because everybody is pushing for more domestic financing, and it's good to see that this is happening in Uganda. In 2019-20, health received an estimated 105 trillion Ugandan shillings, excluding foreign aid. And also, if you include foreign aid on the budget, it grows quite massively, which is good. So basically saying Uganda records a positive trend in the health allocations, but also because the government explicitly decided to include its foreign aid as part of its public purse. So there is always a question of whether we should include donations when we do the Abuja declaration calculations. So where we feel that the government has explicitly decided to use those donations for public health, then there is a debate that actually the donations could actually be counted as local resources because government has decided to put those resources on the needs that we are concerned about. But as a proportion in total government spending, health is facing a downward trend, having recorded 7.2% share in 2018, which goes down to 5.9% share in 2020. So basically indicating that the health allocations are not growing as fast as the total government expenditure. So basically this explains the fluctuations and the decline in the share of health in total government spending. And the last country was Zambia. So we saw that the Zambian total government expenditure has grown by 22% in 2019, 206 billion in 2020, which is quite a most welcomed increase in government expenditure. But then also looking at the health budget, it looked to grow quite positively by 16% from 2019 to 2020. But again, the share of health is not growing as fast as the total government expenditure. So we can see that the health share is declining from year to year, having recorded 9.5% in 2018, which declined to 8.8% in 2020. And for those who are advocating for the Abuja declaration of 15%, this should be a point of concern, saying, why is it that we are going backwards when we should be increasing more resources for health? But then there was quite another issue with limited information on health research investments, where the records, the publicly available records, could not give us a full picture of how Zambia is investing on health and HIV R&D, but also the information from the officials could not really give us the detail in terms of what is really happening. So more investigation might be needed to be done in Zambia to basically track health R&D information and then do all the necessary analysis. But investments in the National Health Research Authority show that there are some spending on human resources and administration. But then the question is, what are those people doing? Are they just doing administration, or are they supporting health research projects, or are they just running some programs within the ministry? So it's quite important to do a more detailed analysis to understand what those human resource costs are related to. Okay, so basically this is a summary of what I was saying in terms of the decline in health expenditure as a share in total Zambian government expenditure. Okay, just quickly, in terms of recommendations, government commitment to invest in health and health R&D needs to be monitored to ensure what is promised is actually delivered. Health and R&D spending needs to be better planned, recorded, and disseminated, because we found that there seem to be different pieces of information on R&D spending, but the information is not well coordinated. Sometimes priority has not been given to record this information. So there needs to be some kind of better planning to make sure that information is managed and then shared. And to cover health R&D funding gaps, government should explore innovative financing mechanisms. This is quite important because we saw that a lot of information comes from donors. So it will help that the countries themselves come up with innovative financing mechanisms in a way of making sure that they increase their resource envelope for health, and within that to make sure that they allocate R&D funding accordingly. And we also believe that increasing health expenditure to 15% of the total government spending would increase available resources to cover health policy priorities, including health and HIV research costs. And governments need to regularly conduct expenditure reviews on health research to understand the financing gaps and the impact of health research spending. This is quite important. Because if we commit to implement a research policy, then it should be sufficiently funded, but then it should be impactful in a way that the research that is done is actually assisting us to change the community health issues that worry us. And governments should develop robust resource mobilization, allocation, utilization, and reporting systems on health research to realize their national health research agenda. This is also very important because most of the countries have set their national health research agenda. But if you look at the financing of it, there is a big gap. So there needs to be better planning to make sure that the research agenda is well coordinated, well funded, and then it is reported upon. Just to close, I would like to acknowledge support and guidance from the ERV team, research associates who assisted in sourcing data in Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia, and also key informants who provided additional information for analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nlanhla. You've done quite a considerably great job with the scarce time that we've given. Just reminding everyone that Nlanhla's presentation will be available for all participants. And when the report, the final report is ready, it will also be shared so that you can go through it in detail. Now we're going to move very fast on to Joyce Nganga from Waki Health. And she's going to give, so Nana has given on the presentation on the actual investments and the availability, the availability of funds. So Joyce is going to give us an overview of what the policy considerations are, the policies that enable domestic resource mobilizations in Africa are. So welcome, Joyce.
Good afternoon, Ethel and everyone. It's great, and thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation about a report that AFNI has been doing in the late last year that AFNI commissioned. So again, my name is Joyce Nganga. I work for Waki Health as a policy advisor, and also I coordinate a network called AFNI, and AFNI is it's an African-led network of HIV prevention research advocates, which is based in Africa, and was born out of a joint vision by African advocates to fast track by continent. And so I'm representing this this network by making this presentation as AFNI commissioned this report, and the assessment was done last year to one, look at the government commitment in terms of policy towards investment in research and development. So we already know that the government are not investing enough in health R&D, and by extension, HIV-related research and development. And so this report was meant or aimed at to develop an advocacy tool with policy key asks that would compel African governments to make commitments towards increasing domestic resource mobilization for health and HIV-related R&D. And so the report or the assessment was looking at policy documents such as policy frameworks, official policies of the government, budgetary allocations, formal speeches and press releases by senior government figures. And this was conducted through interviews, correspondence with well-informed stakeholders about the government's policies into increasing DRM or domestic resource mobilization. The methodology that was used in this assessment, we did lots of desktop review. We had semi-structured interviews that were undertaken remotely with the key stakeholders. We had informal discussions, email exchanges, and as well as a small workshop with the key stakeholders. So what can we expect when this report is launched, when this report is out, is that the report will give advocates a policy tool, which will have key policy asks for advocacy to persuade governments to take greater responsibilities for mandating and funding HIV-related research and development, including prevention as well, prevention-related R&D in their countries and also at the regional level. And the report will also give us 3 concrete case studies that will show some best practices that have been happening in some countries. And we will feature one in Rwanda, Eswatini, and Malawi. And perhaps I could look at some key issues that have been highlighted in the report as we wait for the official launch of this report. So some of the key findings or some of the key issues that are coming out from the assessment we have done so far is that, and we already know that investment in biomedical research cannot, in itself alone is not enough, but needs to be complemented with investments in building health systems or stronger health systems, because then biomedical research will produce exceptional products and outputs. But the value of these can only be realized when health systems are structured and functioning in such a way so to effectively implement or deliver these products and outputs of research and development. Again, effective implementation of research and development, the operation of effective health systems delivery. It will rely heavily on access to comprehensive and well-functioning health information system. That is through collection of data and being able to present this data so that it can inform programs and it can inform evidence-based interventions in our countries. So we know that the health information system in Africa has not been the best or is not strong enough. And therefore, there'll be a recommendation around improving the health information system so that we could have evidence-based and functioning health system. So another key issue in the report is that the advocacy efforts for health R&D would be strengthened more by partnering with experts, and in such disciplines as economists, public finance, business, and international development, the industries and all. So such collaborations are helpful to form and advocate for well-founded and broader arguments to the governments concerning the secondary benefits of health R&D. So strengthening the need for bringing multi-stakeholders together to support R&D. Looking at the political will in terms of investing in health R&D. So beyond this strong political will to mobilize health R&D resources, there must be also commitment and mechanisms to track and monitor the progress of the R&D, the outputs and the outcomes. And this will not only provide vital information to help improve R&D and identify its impact, but may also produce positive material that government may wish also to showcase. So collaborations will not be we cannot re-emphasize more on collaboration at the regional level to expand health R&D centers of excellence, need to require the development of new facilitative regulatory or implementation bodies. These centers of excellence at the regional level could be developed and integrated through existing AU structures and economic communities and blocks, such that the same could serve the region. Still looking at issues highlighted in the report, we also know that the African governments do have a range of non-financial resources that are provided by African governments, which most of the time go unrecognized. However, this report finds that indirect non-financial support alone will rarely be sufficient for health R&D to truly make the desired impacts in our countries and in the region at large. So many governments are not aware of much of the health R&D being taken in their countries. So this was also a key finding, and let alone how such mechanisms are supported through public mechanisms. We found that most officials working in the government do not actually understand or know what research or what R&D was being undertaken in their countries. Just moving on with the key issues in the report. We know that even small budgetary commitments by governments in African governments, and in addition to the forms of non-financial support, can be very powerful and can send a powerful message to potential investors and donors that the government is truly committed to expanding health funds that amount to considerably more than the government contribution. So again, calling for commitments in terms of financial and also the non-financial support so that they can also attract other investors and potential donors to invest in health R&D. And while there's considerable regional support for more South-to-South collaborations around health R&D, there are few economic resources And there is an exceptional case in Rwanda for this. And once we share the report, you'll be able to see that. But the point is, even small contributions by African governments working to create collaborations can be very, very powerful in pulling together this and also having a stronger multiplier effect to attract more funding from donors and other stakeholders. So, and as we go to the next step for this, in as much as the government work towards creating an environment, including earmarking their own funds, inadequate financing and business models and poor infrastructure, those continue still to deter potential investors. So governments, this report or the policy ask will be to call out government to create an enabling environment, a policy environment that can support investors and other donors to actually invest in health R&D. So we are saying that many countries are not able to attract big companies because they don't develop quality business models or even the necessary infrastructure that's needed for health R&D. So what we can expect, or in terms of next steps, is that this report from this assessment will be finalized during this quarter of this year. And we will be able to share a final summarized brief overview of the report. We'll be able to develop a policy brief with policy asks out of the key issues highlighted in the report. And we'll finalize the dissemination strategy, which will include a virtual launch, roundtable discussion with policymakers, and also we'll do letters to the relevant authorities just to be able to pass this policy asks. And lastly, I would like to appreciate or give thanks to CASPA, which is a coalition to accelerate and support prevention research, for supporting this work, and all the comrades out there and advocates. We really do appreciate the support. And I will finish by saying that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So as we continue with the DRM advocacy. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ethel.
Thank you so much, Joyce. You've given us quite a bit of food for thought with regards to policy considerations, but I'm not going to say so much about this. I'm going to hand it over to Daisy, who's going to manage us with the Q&A. I'm sure there are some questions that each of you have for the presenters. I will request that probably well, Daisy, I'll hand it over to you and you can let us know how you'd like us to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ethel, and thank you, Joyce and Nhlanhla, for those rich presentations. I think when we talk about evidence-based advocacy, it needs those kind of numbers. It needs those kind of analysis that are kind of hard work to do. Because for me, I was quite surprised by some of those numbers, because we've always been saying, oh, you governments are not reaching their Abuja declarations. You're not investing the percentage that we want you to, but it seems like some governments are investing that. And as Joyce said, the numbers, they need to be also analyzed further in terms of where is that money going? Is it just paying people's salaries, or is it actually going into health research, as well as the whole health information systems piece that Joyce highlighted, and the critical importance of collaboration. So I'm not going to take so much of the time. I could go on, but let me open it up to questions to either Joyce or Nhlanhla for the next, I think, is it 10 minutes or 5, Ethel?
I'm giving you 5, let's see.
Okay, 5. So we maybe have a couple. So be quick with your question. You can either raise your hand or you can go ahead and unmute yourself. And please introduce yourself as you ask your question. Thank you. Can go ahead and shoot the first question, unless I cannot see a hand open. Oh, Sophie is unmuting. Sophie, do you want to ask a question? Okay, I am happy to ask a question because I had a question in terms of maybe some sort of prediction from Nhlanhla. Where do you see this trend in government investments in HIV R&D research, I mean African governments' investments, going vis-a-vis the pandemic, COVID pandemic I'm talking about? Do you see us going on, where do you see them going based on your research? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Daisy. I think that is quite an important question because we know that every time there is an outbreak, government runs around to find new money to respond to that outbreak. But I think with COVID-19, we did not have much time to prepare. So government had to scratch around within its pockets to see where they can find money to respond to the pandemic. And the question has been, where is that new money coming from? Because we know government are underspending on HIV and other areas. So all of a sudden there's new money, and where is this money coming from? So I think as we move forward, we really need to watch the efforts of government to mobilize for new domestic funding, but also in terms of their engagement with the donors. But I am positive. I think with the pandemic, we can expect some proactive action from government to say these things do happen. We need to prepare ourselves. So I think government will try to find innovative ways of generating money for health, but this will happen only if civil society is doing its advocacy role. Because if you can look at HIV, there's quite a lot of money from domestic sources and from international sources going towards HIV, mainly because civil society has been around making all the necessary noise. If you look at areas where there is silence, government tends to go very slow in responding to those areas. But when we start to voice our concerns and make noise, government do listen, and then they take some corrective actions where things are not going okay. So I think with this exercise that is being done now, we basically need to keep pushing, build up the momentum so that government is aware that someone is watching on the health and HIV R&D arena. And if we keep silent, then we might lose.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for your response. And as Joyce said, a small group of committed citizens can move a mountain as big as our governments. Yeah, so thanks for that. Let me see if there's any hands up, and maybe I'm not looking at the right place.
I see Yolanda's hand.
Oh, Yolanda has a hand up. Okay, I think I can't see the hands. Please, Yolanda, go ahead.
Thank you, Daisy. I have a question for Joyce. Joyce, did you find any countries that had best practices in terms of enabling policies for domestic resource mobilization? I know you mentioned that you're still analyzing your data, but could you share just a bit about, some of the best practices that you found?
Yeah, so Yolanda, yes. So we had 3 countries that had some interesting case studies. That was Rwanda, Eswatini, and Malawi. And they are quite lengthy case studies. So I did not want to quite go into that during this call, as I only had 10 minutes to make these presentations. But I think what we can do and promise is to share those case studies, because there are several cases where the government did an initiative that was very facilitative and very supportive of domestic resource mobilization, either by doing a matching fund, either by rolling out an initiative. So we are still working on that to have the case studies really sound, and also just checking back and forth how the case studies are working in the countries. I mean, the initiatives are working in the countries, whether they're still relevant, whether they're being implemented at the moment or not. So kindly do allow us to share those case studies with when they're really confirmed. But yes, we do have 3 case studies from Eswatini, Malawi, and Rwanda, which we think in this case would be very useful to share with the other countries as a best practice that can be rolled out of, where other governments can borrow from. Thank you, Yolanda, and sorry that I'm not able to speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, sure.
No problem.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And we have a question from Julius Kosgei. It asks whether the report actually disaggregates these findings to actually tease out the investments for pediatric HIV research and development. And I don't know if Kosgei, that's okay, or you want to unmute yourself and ask Julius. Julia, sorry, not Julius.
Hi, Daisy. That is exactly what I wanted to ask. So, yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I guess that goes to Nhlanhla.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the question. Unfortunately, the records that we could access do not give a full disaggregation to understand what goes where. So I think that is one of the areas where we need to advocate to make sure that when the expenditures are recorded, they are clearly coded so that we know how much went to which area of spending. So no, we could not see that disaggregation. But then I think further investigation to the departments, because you might find that the information is recorded somewhere, but nobody is managing it, nobody is sharing it. So I think it's a matter of asking those questions on an ongoing basis.
Thanks. Sorry, Ethel, can you see any other hands? Peter Odenyo is posting something that South Africa seems to be bearing fruit. What are they doing differently compared to other African countries? Is it that they collect better data? Is it that they're not as donor dependent as some of our other countries? Okay, sorry, I shouldn't be putting any words in in anyone's mouth. Maybe Joyce or Nhlanhla want to take that one.
Yeah, let me jump in. So if you look at the IBP Open Budget Index that I showed you, it showed South Africa as having 87 points out of 100. That is position 1 in the world. So South Africa is sharing position 1 with New Zealand for being the most open budget system. So I would assume that maybe there is better recording and sharing of information. So we might say, well, South Africa is doing well, but maybe it's because the information is available and we're able to work with it. So maybe in the other countries, you find that maybe a lot is being done, but it is not recorded and disseminated. So we basically need to go and check in each country in terms of where is the information. And if the information is not available, what can we do to help in terms of improving data management systems and reporting, accounting, and doing all of those things that we need for social accountability.
Thank you for that. And I think South Africa also has some of the most powerful advocacy movements and groups and individuals that keep government on their toes. I hope I'm not just saying that. Ethel and Nhlanhla can correct me.
In fact, that's what I wanted to know. Is the advocacy different from what we are doing in Kenya here and other parts of the country, other parts of the African countries?
If I can come in there, I think, yeah, Daisy, I think you are right in terms of saying South Africa has got quite a powerful civil society. Civil society is not scared to raise their voices. but also civil society can work also with the judiciary to make sure that they take government to court if something is not okay. So I think that gives civil society quite a lot of power to challenge things. So there is the debate around community activism and community consciousness of the issues. So I think civil society organizations can actually build that capacity in the community and make the advocacy voice bigger. And I think if the masses are talking about the issues, then government is forced to listen and respond, because we talk about the power of the people to vote. So if people show that they are not impressed and they can hold their vote because of 1, 2, and 3, then I think that does certainly influence government in some way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we are going to conclude this session here. I can see Lovemore is asking something, but I think in the interest of time, we can maybe answer those offline, and we can't wait for the launch of the report, the official launch. I think that will be a very important moment to show our governments that we are watching and tracking what it is that the investments look like. Thank you so much, and over to Ethel.
Thanks so much, Daisy, for a really great question and answer session. Lovemore, the data that we got was from the countries that we largely have a presence in, the countries that IAVI does have research in and partnerships with local governments. But your point on, a broader, this is just like an initial study. Your point on broader covering other African countries, possibly with time and with funding, that, that's a consideration. It would be interesting to know what's happening elsewhere. So I'm going to change things around a little bit, and I'd like us to do a little exercise. You've listened to two presentations, one on the policy considerations and one on the actual investments. And I have a question for all of us.
Ethel, you've muted yourself.
Oh dear, where did I get lost?
You said you had a question for us. That's where we just heard you.
Yes, so based on the two presentations, what should we focus our advocacy efforts, to really scale up advocacy in our countries or at the continental level? What should we focus our advocacy? What are the priorities in terms of the actual investments? Where should countries be putting their money for our health R&D? And also, what are the what are the priorities that we should be advocating for around policy development? So to help us go through this, I'm going to post a link for a slide on Mentimeter. You're going to be able to post your answer really quickly, and then I'm going to, so as an individual, you're going to respond to this question. But then after we do that, then I'm also going to put us into breakout rooms so that we can have a little bit of a chat with each other and just tease out, do we think the same thing? Are we looking at things similarly? Or do we have diverse priorities that we think should be focused on? So please click on the link. You'll be able to respond as an individual. What are the priorities with regards to investments? What are the priorities with regards to policies? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Before then, I send us into breakout rooms to have discussions with each other on the same questions.
Where have you posted the link?
in the chat. So probably as you all go out to the link, I'll just create breakout rooms and we can have a discussion with each other for the breakout. So you'll be able to respond on the Mentimeter link, but then you'll also then get into the breakout rooms and have this discussion. So the breakout rooms are about to close. I hope everyone got a chance to speak and you're wrapping up now. Okay, so welcome back. We're not going to go right now into the feedback from your breakout sessions because I want to give Alice an opportunity to give us an idea of her experiences from Uganda that came out of what happens really when civil society organizations get a better idea of what's happening in the budget processes. But before I do that, I'm going to show you your Mentimeter, your responses for what our priorities are, your individual responses. Then I'll give an opportunity to Alice to speak. But I'd like to seek your indulgence because I know we've already run 7 minutes of overtime. So I'm not sure if you'll give me another 15 minutes so that we can do this. Let me just share with you the results from your individual voting. It looks like public participation came up as a really strong advocacy effort, public participation in where the investments are going to go. The other strong ones that I can see is advocacy in the budgets, research for pediatric HIV, increased funds for HIV, specific budget allocation towards health R&D. What about with regards to policy? The priorities that have come up are the need for activism. We need to scale up our activism, and we need to have regularly updated policy. I believe that will involve a lot of involvement on our part as advocates to be in touch and to understand what processes are going on. So thanks so much for your participation. Alice, I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can.
Thank you so much, Ethel, and good afternoon to Ethel. Please allow me to share my screen. And Ethel, how much time do I have?
Oh dear, Alice, you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. All
if
right,
you can make it briefer, if you can pull off briefer, that would be great.
I will try, I will try. Yeah, so I'm here to talk to you about, can you hear me all?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, we can hear you, Alice. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Alice Kayongo. I work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and I'm also representing AFNI, the Africa Free of New HIV Infections Network, which is a region-based network. It's the same network that Joyce actually talked about when she was making her presentation. We did have a budget training exercise towards the end of last year, actually maybe just after the first half of last year, that did help us be able to influence at a national level, and we are going on strongly with the same process. I want to start off with a quote by this gentleman, Professor Bill I hope I'm pronouncing it well, but I'll leave it at Professor Bill. He says health financing is baby's milk of healthcare. And he further says that the one who determines your purse determines your healthcare package. I totally want to agree with Professor Bill, because the amount of money that you have in your purse will usually determine what your healthcare package will be like. So I think these issues that we are discussing today are really pertinent issues that should inform a lot of our work, but should inform health in the region generally. So who we are, this coalition, which is the Coalition on Financing for Health Research and Development. It's the acronym is COFRED. It's a national-based coalition in Uganda, which was formed it was formed around August last year, because we were gathered together. Civil society groups in Uganda were gathered by International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, IAVI, in partnership with Jenga Africa. And these two did bring together a group of diverse advocates that were representing over 29 organizations that participated in the virtual workshop. And basically we were getting together to learn about budget advocacy. But also we were training on the entire budget process. The coalition was established to basically spearhead advocacy for financing for health research and development in Uganda. I know some of you may be asking, why then did you have a coalition like, just recently? We have been working very closely with different organizations, but in a loose network. We hadn't yet seen so much results, and we did not know what the problem was or where the gap was. It was only until August last year that we found out what where the gap was. And indeed, one of the gaps that we identified was the fact that we all did not have the same knowledge on the budgeting process. And we did not know what the cycle was like. So we needed to get together to have a formal session taking us through what these processes are like. So what was the value addition of this budget training? For those who have had trainings, I'm sure you have responses, and those who have not had trainings, please join me as you learn what we were able to learn in Uganda. So first of all, we were able to understand and appreciate the general national budget process. This is a process that is not always readily available and understood by anyone who wants to understand the process. It is quite lengthy. I did just pick out a few here that I can share. And first, for example, the budget process involves the Ministry of Finance discussing or sharing issues about the budget call, the Minister of Finance putting out a budget call circular. The sector line ministries then go on to implement or conduct health sector budget working group meetings. The local government budget consultative workshops go on. So this is what the process is like. I will not get into details of what the process is, but then we were able to appreciate step by step of what the budget process is. Initially, we did not know this process, and we did not always know where to come in, at what point to join the process, and at what point to influence. So the training did help us to appreciate this process. Secondly, is that in the training, we were able to appreciate the 10 key source documents for budget analysis. Several times, we don't know what the budget, source documents are, but this time we were able to, first of all, identify them and appreciate them. And just a few of them are listed here: the budget framework paper, the ministerial policy statements, the annual performance reports, the appropriations bills, and so on and so forth. These are documents that we had always been hearing about them, but little did we know that all these documents combined would actually give us a lot more information that is rich enough to help us or empower us with evidence that we can use to be able to influence for reallocation of resources for health R&D. Moving on, Thirdly, we were able to appreciate practical calculations highlighting different ratios for health research and development. And here we looked at external financing versus the government of Uganda financing. We looked at the intersectoral comparisons. We looked at the trend analysis. We looked at the alignment with development, with the National Development Program and the alignment with the Health Sector Strategic Plan. Again, these are processes, these areas that we initially did not know about. So the training that we had did help us be able to appreciate all these documents, but also empower us with more information and knowledge to be able to lobby and advocate from an evidence point of view. We were also able to identify the relevant influencers several times. Or, you know, many of us think that when we are talking about budget advocacy, the first you know, place we should go to are the ministries of health, because that's the ministry that takes, you know, the entire sector that we are talking about. It's because we are referring to the health sector. But then we realize that no, it's not just the Ministry of Health. It could be the president and the speaker. And how do we influence those? First is that you petition them. It's not, you know, anything and everything towards them. With the president and speaker, the best way you can be able to influence them is by petitioning them. We also got to learn about the Ministry of Finance and the committee chairs. The Ministry of Finance we always knew, but the committee chairs, not everyone did know about that. And for us to be able to influence them, it's basically lobbying. We learned that we have to lobby them. We also got to know that the budget committees and the planning units, those are really, really key. They are kind of like the first stop. And for them, we need to have position papers. You can lobby if you want to, but if you don't have a position paper with you, it may be an uphill task for you. The first point of contact or first issue that you need to be able to have with these particular units is having the position paper in order for you to be able to influence them. And lastly, we found out that the permanent secretary, the director of the budget, the sector minister, you know, they are also relevant influencers. And for those, we really have to lobby them. Lastly, I should say that we also got to learn about the framework to track research and development in health. This is one area that we honestly did not know about. We didn't know that we actually had to have a framework. And when we got this framework, it made our lives a lot easier, because you see, you have a framework that horizontally tells you about the type of activity that you want to track against what the government is putting in, against what the external financing is coming in, against the private sector, where the data is coming from, how it's supporting achievement of results, and how relevant it is to the policy process. This kind of summarizes what we actually, it's kind of summarizes the entire training session that we went through. And because of such a document, I will share with you as I come to the end of my presentation some of the achievements that we accomplished towards the end of the year. Remember, this coalition was only established in August 2020. So in a conclusion, I want to say first that, in summary, the budget training that we had in August last year enabled us pull together a team of passionate, committed, and like-minded budget advocates who had the ability to analyze the budget policy documents and were able to point out key recommendations for action. And here I want to present the two examples that I did mention earlier in my presentation. For the very first time, we were able to influence for a supplementary budget on research with regard to COVID-19. One may say that maybe it was coincidental because this is like the trending issue, but I would also ask why now? You know, why did it happen after the lobbying and advocacy work that we did? You know, we got together, we were able to look at the documents, analyze them, get all this information, and we were able to lobby at different levels. So for the first time, we got an increase in money that was allocated to health research and development, and specifically it was allocated to COVID-19. So if someone may say that this was a coincidence, we did have a second win, a second victory towards the end of the year. As we were concluding the budget process in the country, because of the advocacy and lobbying work that we did, especially at the local government level, all regional referral hospitals in Uganda were then able to see an increased amount of money that was allocated to health research and innovation that we had never seen before. Some of them had these commitments indicated in their plans, but unfortunately it wasn't reflected in the budgets. But today I am happy to report that we have these reflected in the budgets. In part, it is attributed to the work that we did as a coalition. I want to end by letting you know that the budget training did help us build and strengthen, it built our confidence. And as such, we were able to interact with policymakers and have a position on key emerging issues in health research and development. And lastly, we were able to influence the way resources are being allocated in health. So I want to end here, and we'll be happy to respond to any questions if you have. I know we are running out of time, but I'll be happy to respond to any questions. Thank you so much, and over to you, Ethel.
Thank you so much for that exciting presentation, Alice. I'm just going to allow people 2 questions to you, a burning question. First come, first served, ask Alice anything with concerns to what they learned, what they went through, what you've seen highlighted. Are there any takers? Note, I'm only giving opening to 2 questions. I can see Landla, you've unmuted yourself. You want to speak?
Oh yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. I just wanted to congratulate the team on the work they've done this far. I think when we gain some capacity on issues, we get really attracted to them and we start enjoying working on it. So I can just feel the energy that Alice is sharing with us, and also to say when we build the capacity, it also gives us the strength, but the confidence to engage with these issues. So it's really, really inspiring to actually hear the story that Alice is sharing with us. So I think if we do more in terms of sharing the skills, building the capacity, building the interest on budget issues, it really will give us bigger results. Because a lot of people, when you talk about the budget, they say, no, that is finance. I know nothing about finance. I was very bad with mathematics at school, and then people just shy away from it. But it's something that can be learned and it can be done. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Any other question, any other comment, question? Alice, I can see very many, big ups in the chat. And yes, we will be sharing the documents for your recap. Desmonio, go ahead.
My name is Desmonio. I'm from Kenya. So first, I'd like to thank Alice for a wonderful presentation. And from her presentation, I think the presentation triggered something in my head. And this is how important organizations or institutions implementing social accountability mechanism tools are important in terms of sharing resources, and also for those institutions that would like to start such endeavors like budget tracking and all that to support HIV research and development. I think whatever Alice has presented has been is really key, is one way in which we can understand some of these budget processes. And yeah, so just a question. Is it possible to get someone from the Ministry of Health as a strategy to reach the health sector? Get someone from the Ministry of Health to train CSOs on budget tracking and use that opportunity to reach out to the health sector. Thank you.
So Desmonio, since you're based in Kenya, I'm going to share with you information. I'll share information on the Coalition for Health Research and Development in Kenya. And that is really a vehicle that has been going through a similar training as that which Alice has described. Maybe you'll get more information from that on your particular question.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and with that, I'll close that session. I think it would be unfair if I didn't let you hear from each other what you had discussed. Your discussions are very important, and also just to appeal to the various groups that had the discussion, you can send me a summary of what you discussed so that we can have good records of that. I'm going to post my email address in the chat, but Angelo, please share with us from your group what you came up with on regional priorities for advocacy. And then I will give, you can just list them, and I will give 2 more groups. If they are ready to go, you can raise your hand as a representative of a group, and you can go after Angelo. Thanks.
Hi, Ethel. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for such great and in-depth conversations. The group I was in had William, Julia, we had Jackie Wambui, and Eric. And we talked about the key priorities, just to list them, was transparency around funding for research and development, with a request to do costed projects. And Julia really pushed for a focus on around HIV, pediatric HIV as a priority. The other priority was building the capacity of advocates to do DRM, and Alice has done a fabulous job to show us what that capacity could look like and what we could get from such capacity building. Then the development and sharing of tools that can be used. Again, Alice touched on this. The framework tools that she has highlighted would be important for us to do any advocacy at the regional level in addition to the country level. Then the other priority will be framing the language around DRM so that as we advocate for DRM projects, we include language on equitable access once the tools that we are pushing for are developed. Again, we see with COVID what's going on. We have effective vaccines in one place being rolled out in certain parts of the world, and we see other countries, especially our countries in Africa, not having even vaccinated a single person. So that equity around access of tools that research and development brings us is going to be key. For lack of time, I won't go into any other detail, but that's what we covered, Ethel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angelo. Is there another group that is ready to share what they had their priorities? If you have priorities that differed from this group, I think I'll just take one more group because I'm hoping that you will email your summaries to me. Any other group going once?
Hi, Ethel. Just a quick summary from our group. We discussed, the need to really look at where the money is going to, that, it's great to have the funding documented, but sometimes it's not always easy to know, or the transparency is not there to really drill down into where the money actually goes to. We also spoke about prioritizing, making sure that as HIV prevention advocates, or advocates who really are championing HIV R&D, that we don't lose momentum in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we should find innovative ways of continuing to champion HIV prevention and HIV R&D in general, so that we don't have a bigger problem post-COVID-19 than what we went in pre-COVID-19 with lack of resources for R&D. So I think in summary, that's what we spoke about. In the interest of time, I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Yolanda. And I just want to emphasize, please send me your contributions for the other groups. Your contribution is extremely important because your priorities are our priorities. We are all in this together. I also just want to apologize. There are some people who did not have groups. They were wondering if they are in a solo group. I am so sorry that you're not able to have this rich experience of discussing with others. I truly apologize for that technical hitch. I'm sorry. So thanks, Nanla, for posting what your group focused on. I think now I also want to just thank you. I know we said we would end at 4. You have been so gracious to be here until 4:30. So let me just hand it over to Yolanda to wrap it up and close us out. Over to you, Yolanda.
Thank you, Ethel, and thank you so much to our speakers who've taken the time to give us the presentations today, and thank you all for attending. For me, in closing, I just wanted to really connect the dots, why this session that we've convened today. So we know that a lot of groups have done DRM analysis in different regions. And as we did this work, we made sure that we consolidated some of the reports into this report. And really, what we wanted to do was to have a baseline. So as Daisy mentioned, that for our advocacy, we need to have evidence. We need to have evidence-based advocacy. So this really was a baseline for us as advocates to start tracking domestic resource mobilization efforts in the countries that we've mentioned. And the report that Nhlanhla presented not only shows us where we are in terms of funding, but it also gives a pathway for advocates to really follow, budget advocacy in their different countries. So I think that's a really important addition to our analysis that really also follows through from the recommendations from the report that WACI Health and AIDS Accountability International did in 2016. So I think this is really a way of demonstrating that we are all in this together, and all our efforts have been taken into account. And we're really excited and looking forward to having the report from WACI Health and AFNI, Joyce, around the policies, so that we have a good repository of information for advocates to really go out there and strengthen their advocacy. And as you've seen and heard from Alice today, that not only did we do the analysis, we then went in and did the training for civil society organizations in South Africa, Kenya, and in Uganda. And that has transpired into the coalition that has been set up in Uganda. And we are hoping that really this demonstrates that we are connecting the dots. We're not just doing analysis for the sake of doing it, but we are really trying to make an impact in terms of our advocacy within the region. So thank you so much. And I know COVID-19 is amongst us. It has brought us a lot of problems, but I think there are also opportunities that we can identify, and looking forward to working with all of you and the CASPA Coalition to really shape our advocacy messages, in the midst of COVID, and having realistic asks of our policymakers when it comes to domestic resource mobilization. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely, wonderful evening.
I think I'll just ask us all to, we can unmute, you can open up your video as you wave out, wave to each other before I close the meeting.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Cheers,
you so
everybody.
Thank
much.
you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.